Welcome to our session on employee ownership and its synergy with in entrepreneurship. And we think there's a lot of synergy there that faculty members will become aware of through the presentations here. And we're going to use a Q&A format, and each person is going to introduce themselves. So I'm Joe Cabral. I'm an alum with Cal State East Bay, formerly Cal State Hayward. I was the CEO of an employee-owned company through a leveraged ESOP. We bought ourselves out of a Fortune 500 company.
I'm Kim Blauer. I'm the Executive Director at the University of California, San Diego. That other school in town, that other San Diego thing that's going on. I've been working in the ESOP community as a consultant for over 35 years, working with companies in various stages of becoming an ESOP. So we'll talk about employee ownership through the ESOP and what that means and how that can be impacted by entrepreneurship.
Hi everybody. My name is Izzet Darendil. I'm an associate professor at California State University East Bay. I'm also the director of our Entrepreneurship Center, Smith Center for Private Enterprises. And we are very excited to host Joe and Kim on this very interesting subject, which is employee ownership.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex Makarevich. I'm also at Cal State East Bay. I'm an associate professor in the strategy and entrepreneurship group, and I do research and I teach on topics like the venture capital, entrepreneurship, strategy, and some other things. And I'm also involved with the Smith Center on an event basis.
All right, so we'll get this started. When Joe and Kim reached out to us, and then when they started talking about employee ownership, and Alex and we had an idea about employee, like ESOPs, right? But we were thinking that, ESOPs is basically what employee ownership is about. And then when they started talking about the differences and advantages of and all those subtle differences and then some important differences between ESOPs and employee ownership, we got more excited because I think it's a very important subject, and as scholars of entrepreneurship and as practitioners of entrepreneurship, I think there are a lot of things that contribute to our community from both the academic side and the practitioner side. So with that, I'll get you started actually, Alex.
Sure. So the format of this session is meant to be sort of kind of participative, right? We kind of seek to engage you in this conversation. So please feel free at any point to ask questions or provide any contributions to the dialogue that is going to happen here. So the format is basically if that of a fireside chat, even though we don't actually have actual fire, but we hope to recreate the atmosphere to some extent. So let us start with the basics. Let us kind of get a better idea. What is employee ownership? What are the forms, and also what are the key features of this arrangement?
So I like to break down employee ownership into 3 categories so that I can quantify them, because I think it is 3 distinct groups. Equity ownership, profits ownership, and employee ownership are the 3 categories. And this term was started, I was just talking to somebody about the UK, but I heard this at a conference that I was at on employee ownership at Oxford last September. So when we talk about equity ownership, that's what you find in in publicly traded companies, or if you're providing equity to key leaders. So when we're talking about equity ownership, stock options, restricted stock, stock appreciation rights, SARs, phantom stock. Somebody's calling in right now wanting to know about it.
Somebody needs to have this information really bad.
They're a form of ownership, or employee stock purchase plans that you do at publicly traded companies in particular, where you get an equity interest, you hold it for a period of time, and you normally sell it if you're broad-based, as some of those programs are in publicly traded companies, or if you're key management, you may hold it for a long term. Okay, so that's a equity participation. You really don't have a big say in the company because you're just a minority shareholder, and the employee ownership is minor. Then we have profits ownership, which is what is occurring in Canada, well, maybe occurring in Canada. They're trying to get legislation passed, but in particular in UK and other countries across the country, some here in the United States. And when I talk about profits ownership, that's where the company is owned by a trust. In UK, there's a lot of perpetual trust being established. Some of that's happening in the United States. So the trust owns the stock, but the employees never get an allocation of the stock in value. They never participate in the growth in the stock in value. What happens there is because it's not owned by us, who want our profits, it's owned by a trust that is just the owner and doesn't expect any profits to come to it. The profits of the company can be paid out to the employees, whether it's in a co-op arrangement would be also a form of profits ownership, I'd put in that category, where patronage dividends are paid out to the associates every year of the profits, and they're accumulated, and you get the value if you terminate employment. So you get to participate in the profits of the company, but it's not a value creation per se. You get voting, that it's very common in co-ops. You're going to have one vote per person. So each of you, no matter, and you join generally in a co-op, you buy in and you get an equity, you get your interest, and that entitles you to the profits interest and the vote. So that's kind of the profits ownership. And the third category is employee ownership, which, since I deal with ESOPs, I think is the greatest. But anyways, I don't want to, all of them have their uses and complexities and downsides. ESOP is where the stock of the company in 100% owned ESOP. And in the ESOP, it can be owned partially by the ESOP and partially by other people, non-investors, et cetera. But it is where the stock is owned by the trust, and then the employees participate in the allocation of that stock. And so when they terminate employment, they get paid out the value of the stock, just like any shareholder would when you terminate your interest. All three of these, I think, could be used with entrepreneurs and in entrepreneurial aspects, and we're going to talk about that today. But we just want to lay out the three concepts of where I think employee ownership falls. Does anybody have any comment? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Come on, I've been working for it 35 years. I've learned that one thing in my life, so I appreciate it. The question was, what does ESOP stand for? So ESOP is Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and so under the Internal Revenue Code and under ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, it's provided special tax benefits, and it's a qualified retirement plan, just like a qualified retirement plan is also a 401k plan, a profit sharing plan, defined benefit. And ESOP has the unique aspect that plan is designed to invest primarily and generally exclusively in the employer stock of the company. Okay.
I didn't know Walmart was one of the largest ESOP, right? That's out there. Is that correct?
Well, that's the difference in what Joe and I are going to be talking about today. There's publicly traded ESOPs, where that is more, I would put that as share owner or equity ownership, not employee ownership, because the employees might own 3%, through that 401k, they have an ESOP, and then you can buy and sell stock. I was at Principal Financial Group. We were a publicly traded company. We could buy and sell stock. And the reason Principal wanted us to do that and could invest in employee stock purchase plans and stock options, they just wanted us to have focus on the value of the company, but it wasn't ownership like Joe had when he was the CEO and helped co-found CPI that he's going to talk about today. So it's a different beast. So I do want you to understand there's the public ownership, and I think that's critical in research because it's easy, you can find data on publicly traded companies, and you can't find data very easily, so Is that, I gave him, there is filing, but on the plan, so there is some information, but there isn't much information you can get on privately held companies. And so that's really hard in the research, because I think there's a difference when we talk about how employees view their company at an ESOP-owned company, and Joe can talk about it, but I've seen it over my career where employees at New Belgium Brewing Company or Bob's Red Mill or Winco Foods, or I'm just trying to think of people that you know, Baker Electric here in town, Taylor Guitars. Andy Powers is going crazy over at Baker Guitars. He's so excited about being owned by an ESOP.
Publix is a large one.
Yeah. So it's just, at those companies, the employees they're involved. It's their company. They really view it as their company. Whereas when I was at Principal Financial Group, I could invest and they had an ESOP, but I don't view it as my company. It's publicly traded. They're working for the public market. So there is clearly a different philosophy, and I think that's what's critical, and we'll get into. Sorry, I went off on a tangent.
Maybe the only thing you need to get it is not all ESOPs are employee owned, but and not all employee owned firms are ESOPs. It's very confusing, I know. Yeah. So I know I'm just looking at the people in the room, and we got like a variety of different individuals. So we got practitioners, we got academicians, we got accelerators, and who are helping with the communities. And so I was wondering, like, how employee ownership actually what kind of role do they play in the business ecosystem, in the wider business ecosystem? And then how this is related to innovation and entrepreneurship and impact that they are creating, maybe their communities.
Okay, so I'm going to make some comments from the CPI, Transfer Products vantage point of our experience, and then Kim's going to kind of clean it up because he has got all the, from an advisory educational standpoint to offer. How many have heard of an employee stock ownership plan before? Okay, about half the room. So I'll try to take it easy. We were a eligible divestiture candidate within a Fortune 500 company. We were very small, 90 people, including 15 temps, in a 30,000 employee organization. So we were in markets and products that didn't fit the core purpose of the parent company, and they said, we're going to allow you to spin off. And they started looking for somebody to spin off to, and I was the leader of the band there at this little operation. So I got together with my executive team there. We had all the functions of the company for our products, which were just metals and plastics in a high-tech firm. You can imagine how embraced we were by them. And started looking for how can we do a buyout. And ran across this thing called an ESOP, where all employees become owners in the company. And I thought, what a fantastic concept. Everybody is going to want the company's success. The alignment will be amazing. And there are tax benefits on top of that. And we pay for the company through future earnings. So we took out what is called an ESOP loan, and we paid that off through future earnings. But we needed some initial equity. Bank doesn't want to sell you or take the loan on a company with no equity in it. That doesn't make sense. Well, we did something that you probably couldn't do today. We made a closed offering to employees to roll 401k dollars into an initial offering. And that became the initial capital was a little over $1 million that we raised through the 401k rollover, with only 44 participants, because it was a closely held offering, and only 35 unaccredited investors could invest. So there was a lot of constraints to doing this, but we were able and managed to get it through, and everyone became an employee owner. The success of the company, to outline it just briefly, we took a $1 million investment by employees and a $1.5 million ESOP loan, $2.5 million of initial equity, And we grew that in 10 years to $120 a share from $4 a share. Fairly significant increase. Employee ownership allowed that to happen because everyone was working as an entrepreneur. They're now owners. They think like owners, and they propose and act upon the things that they know and control within the company. And the way we conveyed ownership was, if it's your work area, you own it. You're the most important person, the most knowledgeable person of your work area. The only thing we asked was that they communicate decisions being made, talk to the people that are impacted, those that are one level below the decision, one level above the decision. That usually captures all the people that are being impacted. And the reason to do this is because you're going to create wealth by the company's value increasing. If we all work together, the company will be worth more, and you're going to get the benefit of that. And we showed that. To date, there's been $114 million through 2021 that have been paid out of the trust. Because the way the trust works is when you leave the company, you retire from the company, you get the shares, the value of the shares that are in your account, and then the company buys those back, and you get the cash. And you may get the cash right away, or if it's a very high balance, it might be paid off over a number of years. But you are getting the value. And so
were the employees getting payouts of $100,000? I mean, is that a huge amount, or is that just too big?
The payouts were amazing. Payouts were as little as $5,000 for somebody who was new and got out just after they vested, to well over $1 million, and changed their lives. If you can imagine someone retiring saying, Joe, I can do things in retirement now that I never dreamed of. Now, we make a point that your ESOP is not your only retirement plan. You should have your own 401k plan, combine that with Social Security, and plan for your future, because you don't want all your eggs in one basket. But what the ESOP provides are all of those additional things that you can do. You can take cruises, trips, pay for college educations, donate to philanthropic organizations. You can do anything you want to do with that. And you didn't have that ability to do it without that wealth creation. So when I heard a few of the sessions here, I'm trying not to take too much time, but a few of the sessions, Lily kicked off the day with social entrepreneurship. I don't know of a better benefit to a social responsibility and social entrepreneurship than taking average day employees and giving them a future where they could never on a paycheck create a life that they can create by being a part of the ownership of the company that they work for. If that's not entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, I don't know what the definition is. And then they, in turn, do an awful lot of stuff in the community. They live there. And if they have the means, they're out there doing contributions, whether it's to their YMCA or their church or whatever it might be. That's where I would like to see companies focus, is not on the company itself doing the work, but on their employees being encouraged because of the value system of the company, the philosophy of the company, to want to engage with the community. And hopefully the company has the social values to encourage that. And that's what we did at Chats with Products. We had a lot of investment that we did in the community through our employees. So, I guess the important takeaway is those who create the wealth share in the wealth created. It's a concept that I haven't heard here. I haven't heard a lot of attention to the employees. The entrepreneur is kind of like on one side, and then it's like everything else is on another side. The benefit of employee ownership is to bring labor and capital, if you will, management together and have them totally aligned to increasing the value of the company, and doing it in a way that is very responsible, because they want to be proud of the company that they work for. Participative management is a real important part of the success of any employee-owned company, ESOPs included. So you can provide ownership, but if you don't have them participating in the company, management decision-making, participative decision-making, you're not going to get the full benefit. And from a respect standpoint, who knows better than the employees as to what decisions should be made, what recommendations should be taken on and considered, what suggestions, who's listening to the customer, the salespeople listening to the customer, ideas flow in, who's going to filter through those ideas. It's the employees that do this the best. So here I am rambling on a little bit, but just want to give you kind of a flavor of why an ESOP, employee ownership, and entrepreneurship should be tied together. It should be taught in your entrepreneurship classes. And there's lots of material for you to draw from. You don't have to go from scratch. So, you have anything to add to that, Kim?
Sure, I always have things to add. A question for you would be, when you teach your students about entrepreneurship, what's the most important item they need? What are you teaching them they need? How are they going to be successful? How do they get this off the ground? What do they need first? A good team?
Good team. Together, everyone achieves more. Yeah, it's true.
They like to stay with what they're comfortable with, so that's it.
So I challenge you to also think about those employees. As you said, you got to have a great team. So how are you going to motivate them? And the common way in a startup, and it's probably an optimal way, is to share equity ownership. The ESOP that Joe's talking about was unique at their company because they were being extracted from a company. They needed to buy it out, so it was an established entity. You look like you're gonna correct me here.
I have a question about that, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
But
please,
when you
no.
do the ESOP, if it's private, public, whichever, when somebody retires out and you pay them out, do the people that you bring on, do you bring them into that? Or do you bring new people? That's what I'm getting. Who come into the company, do they come in and do the same thing? Is that
Great
how it
question.
works?
Great question. Yeah, ESOPs, again, are a qualified retirement plan, just like your 401k plan. So as you know, many of you have 401k plan where you put money into the 401k plan. That's your money, but then the company matches it. So the company money comes in. But some of you may have participated in retirement plans and at where the company contributes to the plan. That's what an ESOP is. The company is allocating stock to you every year based on your wages compared to other employees' wages. So again, if it's, let's say it's 10% of your wages. So if you make $100,000, you're going to get $10,000 of stock allocated to your account in 2023. And then in 2024, you're getting another 10,000 or 10% of your wages that year, and et cetera. And so that's going to accumulate in your account, and it's actually in your account for your benefit in this trust. And record keepers keep track of that. And then when you go to retire, you may have 10,000 shares worth $100 a share, and I think that would be I can't do it today, but I mean, that's not enough. I think it's $1,000 a share. I'm trying to get to $100,000 of balance, and you'd get a payout. Or in Joe's case, where the employees did very well, they had 10,000 shares and at $100 a share and did very well. So that's what we see, and that's kind of how it works. The thing to understand with an ESOP and perpetual trusts and co-ops, the employees don't actually own the stock. It's in a trust and held by the trustee. And so they're never owners. Now in a co-op, you are an owner in that membership, and you do get to vote because of that. In an ESOP, the employees don't get to vote. We'll just state it like that. Vote. And economists and many academics criticize that about ESOPs. And I think that's missing a point in my experience, because I'm on board of directors. And board of directors work is strategic vision, and you need people that understand that. And employees voting on that would be helpful in a lot of cases, but where you're owned 100% by a trust, you don't have another shareholder, you don't have Kim Blauer out there saying, oh no, I want all the wealth for me, I'm not gonna pay my employees money. Because all that value that the company creates in an ESOP or a perpetual trust or a co-op, where does it go? Does it go to Wall Street? Does it go to Kim Blauer as a shareholder? No, it goes to the value of the company, or is paid out to the employee. In other words, it all comes right back to the employees, and that's the power of employee ownership that is beyond the public market or beyond the profit sharing. Well, the profit sharing does it, but the equity ownership that I talked about, where it's just temporary.
Can you go back to the initial dynamic about when most of our students or people that we interact with, they are thinking about finding their own startup, and the first thing is building a team is, as you said, equity sharing, and how it would be different, how it would change things going forward for a startup if they choose employee ownership from the beginning compared to the traditional way, but we talk about in Silicon Valley.
The ESOP community is just waking up to entrepreneurship, I would say. And my argument I'm going to discuss on Monday to a group of 70 leading ESOP consultants is ESOP companies are the ideal ownership for entrepreneurship, for innovation. ESOP companies are designed to be have a long-term vision of investing. Alex DeNoble's great book, The Entrepreneurs from Within, states publicly traded companies, that's a real problem for an entrepreneur, because you can't be within the company and have a long-term vision, because everything, you go to a manager and say, yeah, I need 10 million of capital to generate this, and maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, we'll have a great return. That's hard. ESOP companies can have that long-term vision. Mature ESOP companies have excess cash. There's many successful ESOP companies that are drowning in cash, and they're sticking it in money market accounts a lot. They're getting very poor returns, and my discussion on Monday to this ESOP group is stop it. Start using some of that money. So there's kind of the entrepreneurship. I think that ESOPs, plus it has the mechanism in place for rewarding your employees, because if they increase value, it goes to them. And then, if you want to share others to people that bring these ideas forward. And there are participative managements often in these successful ESOP companies like CPI, that you don't have the managements on top of you, because ESOP companies kind of help regulate the free rider. Because if you're a free rider in a company and you're just a slacker, your peer is going to come around to you and say, you're hurting my value, you're hurting my profit. So there's less management often in ESOP companies because of that, because you don't need somebody sitting over somebody's shoulder making sure they do their job today. So again, we think it's all. So that's what entrepreneurship. But go back to these ESOP companies have a ton of cash. Why wouldn't your entrepreneurs, rather than going to a VC, go find an ESOP company or companies that want to invest in businesses, and they could bring capital into the business, allow that owner to, start their business, because they're going to have to give up a lot of control when they go to a VC, right? When you go to a VC, the VC now runs you. ESOP companies will be better partners in that. Again, they have a longer-term vision of VC and private equity. They generally have maybe a 5-year turnaround window. So ESOP companies, I think, provide that avenue. So there's both entrepreneurship that I think is something for all of your students to, teaching that in your courses. That's why I like Alex's book, The Entrepreneurs from Within. I can't believe, and you guys are the experts on entrepreneurs. I deal with the maturity ESOP companies, so we're down the road, but we deal with innovators. But they can't all be, I want to go out and start a business and form an organization and management and go through and have an HR department and deal with all the kinds of labor laws and other things. If you can do that within a company and feel comfortable that you're going to have that support and the money and the backing, that to me provides a really safe, and if we can get these darn companies to do that more, which they are, it's going to be exciting. And if you guys start teaching it, it will happen on the other side, and that's what we need. Yes?
I'm just curious for the settings of the numbers that you're kind of throwing me a little bit. So if we are VC back, we'll have options. We'll generally pull in an ESOP. And in order to get the companies to be financed, and employees are incented through those options agreements, so it aligns everyone. But I'm curious, what other financing would be available? Would you be looking for individuals who would basically turn around a company, and they might have some net worth, so they might invest their own capital, and they would be purchasing shares, and then you do an ESOP on top of that for those who aren't banked? Or I'm trying to come up with the scenarios. I heard the spinoff scenario, and I've heard the kind of the option agreement for VC backed, but what's the other setting where we could use ESOPs?
I'm involved, I'm on the board of directors of a company that has invested in 6 startups. They're investing a few $1 million to multiple $1 million in startups, in those startups, and they're, in technology and in other business startups, and they're going for it. They're acting as a VC, but because they're employee owned, they're going to be what I think a better investor in this.
I see. They're going to perform better, but you're still looking for an exit strategy. Ultimately, these companies are sold.
Right, and that's what is. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting up and you go to an ESOP company and they say, okay, I'll bring in $10 million of seed capital to you, and whether it's through equity or debt, you start the company, you grow it. 5 years later, 10 years later, you get to a value. What's the exit strategy that they're expecting?
Well, some kind of major return, but the share per value.
For a private equity firm, right?
Right.
So the legacy, there is no company legacy in those situations. That entrepreneur is not going to develop a legacy or develop a company.
That's a good point.
They're
so basically, it's a continuity of the management team that's the biggest advantage.
But if that ESOP company is that investor, they get to participate for 5 years, and so let's say they're an equity investor at a small amount, or they got warrants or whatever it is, and they get a return at the end. They get to 5 years, and this entrepreneur says, I'm done. I got this company going. We're flying. I'm ready to go on to the next one, right?
So it will act as CEEC from that perspective, corporate venture capital, which there are multiple exit strategies, but they are strategic investments, right?
The ESOP company may want to just buy that company and own it, not buy it to flip it.
Yeah.
Buy it to own it, because
Yeah.
ESOP companies.
Yeah, you can merge, obviously you can just merge them together, especially if the product lines and markets align, then why not, just grow the company.
That's interesting. So you could combine companies, and with those M&A activities, basically the ESOP-driven company
Yeah.
could absorb the other one and then give the investors an exit.
there's multiple companies out there right now that are a holding company.
Yeah.
And they're going out and acquiring businesses and diverse businesses. And the holding company provides, you know, the structure and the, you know, some leadership and some, you know, the HR and all that. But the individual companies are going to operate autonomously. And again, if you're a venture, if you're, you know, if your life is starting things and selling off to that and allowing that culture and the employees that you got to share in the future growth and employee ownership and be with a great organization, and maybe you go off and start another one, and maybe that company that not only buys it from you, but then says, hey, we like you. We'd like to invest in the next thing that you got, because you go off and you do that. And these companies that are doing that, they got multiple CEOs at these holding companies, and so they're getting, they got people that can move up and move around and come into different work. So it's a next phase in our ESOP community, and that's why I'm so excited I'm here, is because you guys are on the front end of this that can lead to these opportunities, and these opportunities are now coming forward because the community is mature enough, and there's just, like a lot of people, there's just cash sitting around in these ESOP companies with no place to go.
The more traditional approach has been seller financing. And so you have a company, you want to sell to your employees, they don't have the wherewithal to finance it. The seller takes back the paper, and basically employees pay for that over time through future earnings. Right. So that's kind of the more traditional. The way Kim is describing is an expansion of our ability to grow employee ownership. We've been very anxious to have enough capital available so that those opportunities can be captured. I've always taken the approach, if you have the resources in terms of good markets, good products, strong resources in terms of people, and people are by far the most important part of the equation, the money will find you. The money will find you. It's not going to be easy, but the money will find you.
You know, new cash is always, I'm sorry if I'm dominating things, but new cash is always difficult when you're refinancing and restarting a company or turning a company around. And there's a local guy, Art Lipper, who's been talking about royalty financing for a long time. So, you know, that could be the 1-2 punch, you know, employee ownership with royalty financing that's truncated on a certain IRR. Yes. You know, and those vehicles don't exist. I mean, it's almost like where's our financial engineers? Do we need to build a new product? You know, he started the Lipper Fund Average and all. And the way royalty would work is you're just looking for a percentage of revenue until it's paid off.
Yeah. I hope we give you some thoughts here that, including just ESOPs in your discussions and not just VCs and private equity, that ESOP companies are out there, and they should be considered. They will be, if we need to get the community off of being too darn conservative.
So this brings up the next question. Now you got excited, all the academics and all entrepreneurship instructors. So you wonder about the next question is.
Yeah, the question then, this is an invitation for our audience to participate as well as a question for our panelists.
How can we make employee ownership a more prominent part of our entrepreneurship curriculum? Because talking from my personal experience, there is definite disconnect. When I studied the literature and you know, in preparation for my courses, there's not a lot of information available, or at least it's not as prominent. And also the textbooks that we might use for our entrepreneurship courses, there might be a small paragraph on ESOP, but as we learned today, you know, this is just a small part of what employee ownership might be. So how can we make it more prominent, a more prominent part of what we teach in entrepreneurship and our overall curriculum?
The employee ownership movement in ESOPs hasn't grown. There's only 6,500 ESOPs in the country or so, give or take, and that number hasn't grown. There's more participants today than there has been, but it just hasn't grown. And it, you know, being in this community and seeing what the power is and seeing the benefits and et cetera that happens to the communities, the employees, the company, the selling shareholders, everybody, it baffles our mind, kind of. But the way we're going to change that is you guys.
Yeah, I'm distressed. I'm actually distressed about the amplification of the venture capital model in all of our coursework. And you know what I like about your message is that there's a whole category of companies that are cash flowing companies, that are durable companies, that aren't just oriented around exit, that by motivating the employees to be aligned with the strategy of the company, they'll perform better. They're probably more build to last than build to sell. I love all the messages. I think the best way to probably communicate it would be to come up with case studies of scenarios where there was either a turnaround or a refinancing or a spinoff, and make sure people know how they were structured by just walking through the cap charts of those companies, and then maybe having some critical evaluation on performance advancements. But you're absolutely thinking the right way.
Yeah, and it's not just for turnarounds. I know that seems to be an appeal. This is about sustainability. You don't have 5 to 7 years. You have for as long as the company could be in existence. You're going to have, if you think of the repurchase obligation, because you have this trust with beneficial shares, an employee leaves and it's bought back, it's like a perpetual buyback. And it's to the benefit of the current employees, and each year they get a new distribution of shares. The result of that from a performance standpoint, I talked about social entrepreneurship, but from the standpoint of performance, there are numerous studies that employee-owned companies outperform the conventional firms. And we haven't taken advantage of that. That is where capitalism should take us, to where we maximize performance. Can you imagine a world where instead of the 1% dominating the 99%, we have the 99% participating as capitalists in the firms where they are employed? What kind of a world would that be? What kind of performance could we expect in our nation if that were the case?
I would put forth that having working groups get together and talk about issues and has been really successful in my career. And you know, I said on Monday we have 70 people to come together. I formed this group 12 years ago of ESOP consultants to help move the ESOP community forward. Now, we now have 180 people that participate in this group, which it's just a group. It's not an association. I would be so excited if you would volunteer to be part of a working group to help move this forward a little bit, and facilitating that, we would be thrilled to do. And of course, we now have virtual, so we can do that virtually. So we'd be thrilled to, and we could bring, so if that's of interest, I don't know how we could get that word out to the group here.
No, that's great. And, of course, one challenge we see seems like there's a dead valley. It's like there's this open space and blank space between, you got those small businesses or small business ideas. Most of our communities, colleges, we have some students or some founders that have small business ideas that are not that scalable, that are not scalable at all. And then you got the VC funding, like potential, but they only go to the sexiest companies out there, right? So it seems like there are also many companies that might, if they find the appropriate fund, they're going to create so much good positive impact for their own companies, for own employees and the community. And then this fits perfectly there. So it has been an eye-opening since the conversation. We have started the conversation. And I think it's a great idea to start that maybe working group, and then maybe work on some of the research-related subjects, and then incorporate it into more our curriculum. Maybe can they invite you to as guest speakers?
Yes, I'm actually on the Speakers Bureau for the Institute of Employee Ownership at Rutgers University, so you can reach me through there. There's a link that has set up for you to get into the client library for employee ownership at Rutgers University. It's the most extensive library of employee ownership in the world. Anything that you might be asking about in terms of employee ownership is housed there. There's much more research and information than you might envision. I'd like to read a statement here. This is what got me into employee ownership. It's like, Cabral, how did you even get into this thing? And so let me just read this to you. If you can digest what I'm reading here, that would be great. We believe that employee ownership improves American competitiveness, that it increases productivity through greater employee participation in the workplace, that it strengthens our free enterprise economy and creates a broader distribution of wealth, and it maximizes human potential by enhancing the self-worth, dignity, and well-being of our people. Therefore, we envision an America where employee ownership is widely recognized as a catalyst for economic prosperity, where the great majority of employees own stock in the companies where they work, and where employee ownership enables employees to share in the wealth they help create. And we look for our nation to become, for all the world, an example of prosperity with justice through employee ownership. So that was a little belief statement that got me going. Everything I've touched in the research says that this is true. It's not just a figment of my imagination, but in fact, it really does hold up under the scrutiny of research.
I'd like to leave you with a quote, too, if you don't mind. Greg Graves is the retired CEO of Burns & McDonnell. They're a $3 billion value engineering firm headquartered in Kansas City. They have about 6,000 employee owners. Greg wrote a book called Create Amazing because he wanted to tell his story of being a CEO at a very successful ESOP-owned company. In the book, he says, ideal employee owners are often closet entrepreneurs whose low risk tolerance won't support starting business on their own. Employee ownership can be exactly the right mix to quench their ownership thirst while you've gained a terrific employee owner. Thanks so much for letting us go on and talk about our passion, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
I've brought some books. It's called The Citizen Share. It's a nice history of employee ownership all the way from the founding of the country to today. I'm just going to set them out here. Anyone who wants one, just pick one up. Okay? Any final questions?
If you guys want to know more, I think you can step in from there. This will take you to a network. So thank you for attending this session.